The floor was slick with gray packing sludge when Barrett pointed at it, then at me. The overhead lights reflected off the mess, making it look almost metallic. His finger jabbed the air between us like a weapon being loaded. "Since you're dressed so casually today, why don't you mop it up with your shirt?" His voice carried across the entire loading bay, loud and deliberate, making sure everyone heard. Laughter erupted behind him, sharp, mean, the kind that cuts. I looked around, and no one would meet my eyes. Aiden turned back to his pallet. Abel suddenly found something fascinating on his phone. Luis walked away toward the far dock. My hands went to my work badge, fingers fumbling with the plastic clip. My pulse should have been racing, hammering in my ears, but instead it steadied, smooth as glass, cold as ice. I took a breath that filled my lungs all the way down to the bottom. "I'm done cleaning up your messes," I said, my voice quieter than I expected, starting with this one. The words hung in the air like smoke. The whole loading bay went silent. Someone's radio crackled with static. A forklift beeped in reverse somewhere far away in the back section. Barrett's smile froze on his face like ice forming on a windshield. I unclipped my badge completely and held it in my palm, feeling its weight, the smooth plastic edges, the metal clip still warm from my body heat. What happened next would change everything. I could feel it. The moment stretched out, rubber band tight. I bent down, but not toward the sludge like he expected. My knees cracked as I crouched beside the metal supply shelf bolted to the wall. The spill kit sat right there where it always was, where it had been for months, bright yellow with reflective tape on all four sides, completely ignored like it didn't exist. I grabbed it with both hands and felt my fingers shake against the plastic handle. The anger steadied them, though, better than any amount of coffee or adrenaline ever could. I walked back slowly, deliberately, each step measured, and set the kit on the pallet scale between us. I placed it down like a chess piece being moved into position. The metal made a hollow sound that echoed slightly. Barrett took a step toward me. His polished shoes caught the overhead fluorescent lights, gleaming. Expensive leather? Probably $200. I watched his face carefully, looking for the exact moment he'd make his choice, studying every micro-expression. Would he back down now that I'd called his bluff? Would he double down and make this whole situation worse? The rest of the crew had stopped pretending to work entirely now. Everyone was watching. I could feel their eyes on my back, on my hands, on the yellow spill kit sitting between me and Barrett like a piece of evidence presented in court. My heart hammered once, twice, 3 times. Then I straightened my spine and waited, saying nothing. This was his move now. His decision. Barrett's nameplate gleamed on his office door upstairs, polished metal that reflected his smile, the one that never quite reached his eyes, never carried any real warmth. I'd been working the night shift at Crossway Distribution for 8 months now. First week here, he'd called me kiddo, in that condescending way that made my skin crawl. By the 5th week, it had changed to dead weight when he thought I couldn't hear him. Month 2, he started calling me at 2 a.m. to check the docks, knowing full well I lived 40 minutes away in the next county. I was the one they called when trucks ran late, and angry drivers pounded on the bay doors demanding someone let them in. I came running when forklifts coughed black smoke and died, mid-aisle, blocking entire sections. I was there when the computer scanners glitched and crashed, and the whole system went down and boxes piled up like a wave about to break over everything. I knew which drivers drank too much coffee and got jittery on the road. I knew which ones fell asleep in their cabs and needed a knock on the window. I knew which pallets were stacked crooked and would fall if you looked at them wrong. I knew which racking bolts were loose and needed tightening before someone died. I wasn't nobody. I'd put in hours that bent my back and left my shoulders aching and grease under my fingernails that wouldn't scrub out no matter how hard I tried. So why was I treated like trash? That question burned in my chest every single shift, hot and constant like a coal that wouldn't go out. It made my jaw tight and my hands curl into fists when I wasn't paying attention. I carry a small black notebook everywhere, the cheap spiral-bound kind you find in a bin near the pharmacy checkout counter. The cover's gone soft from being shoved in my back pocket during every shift, the corners bent and worn. Inside are dates written in blue ink, direct quotes, screenshots I'd printed on copy paper at the library, and carefully taped onto the pages. Schedules Barrett had changed at the last minute to force what he called voluntary overtime, though there was nothing voluntary about it. Photos of untagged pallets stacked 3 feet above the red safety line, swaying dangerously when forklifts drove past too fast. I'd started keeping the notebook after my first month here, when I realized no one else was paying attention to anything. No one was watching. No one cared. It began as pure survival instinct. If something went wrong, and things went wrong constantly, I wanted proof it wasn't my fault. But over time, the notebook became something different, something more. A ledger of wrongs, a record of negligence, hard evidence. I'd written down the exact time Barrett screamed at Aiden for being 10 minutes late, then left 2 hours early himself. I'd noted every single safety shortcut, every ignored warning, every close call that made my stomach drop. The notebook felt heavy in my pocket now, pressing against my leg like it weighed 10 pounds instead of a few ounces. The question sitting in my mind was simple but terrifying. How could I use it without burning myself alive in the process? Barrett swaggered closer now, closing the distance between us with deliberate steps. His shoes were expensive, real leather polished to a mirror shine, and now they were tracking straight through the very sludge he'd just ordered me to mop up with cotton. The irony of it wasn't lost on me at all. He stopped exactly 3 feet away. I could smell his cologne, something sharp and expensive. His arms crossed over his company polo shirt, the Crossway logo stretched across his chest. His jaw was tight. "You refusing a direct order?" His voice was quieter now, but somehow sharper, meaner, more dangerous. I looked him straight in the eye and didn't blink. My voice surprised even me when it came out, calm, level, surgical in its precision. "I'm refusing an unsafe one." The difference between those two things mattered more than anything. Refusing him personally was insubordination, grounds for immediate termination. Refusing an unsafe order was my legal right under federal law. I'd looked it up. I'd memorized the regulation number. I watched his face carefully for any reaction. His smirk faltered, just for a second. Just long enough. His eyes flicked down to the yellow spill kit between us, then back up to meet mine. He wasn't used to being challenged, not here, not in his kingdom, not by someone like me, who was supposed to stay quiet and obedient. I'd found something important just now. A seam in his armor, a crack in the foundation. The question burning in my mind was whether I was actually brave enough to pry it open wider. Behind Barrett, I saw Abel shift his weight from one foot to the other, still watching. Waiting. The whole warehouse was waiting. So was I. The break room at 3:10 in the morning always felt wrong somehow, like a place that existed outside normal time. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead like trapped insects trying to escape. The clock on the wall with the cracked plastic cover ticked too loud, each second audible. 2 coworkers sat at the scratched plastic table, both stirring powdered creamer into burnt coffee without looking up at me when I walked in. I poured my own cup from the pot that had been sitting on the burner for 4 hours, hands still shaking slightly from the leftover adrenaline. One of them finally spoke, his voice low and careful. "You're picking a fight you won't win." He didn't look at me when he said it, just kept stirring his coffee in slow circles, watching the liquid swirl. The other one nodded in agreement without saying anything. I stared into my own cup. The coffee was dark, almost black, with an oily sheen on top that caught the light. I realized something important then. Standing there in that cold room with the vending machine humming in the corner and the smell of old coffee heavy in the air, I wasn't picking a fight. I was documenting one. There's a real difference between those two things. A fight is emotional, reckless, stupid, something that happens in the moment. Documentation is cold. It's facts and timestamps and evidence that doesn't care about anyone's feelings. I wasn't trying to beat Barrett with my fists or even with my words. I was building a case against him, brick by brick, entry by entry, line by line. And legal cases don't lose their temper or make stupid mistakes. I started reading OSHA regulations in the bathroom during my lunch break a few weeks back. I'd pull up the official website on my phone, scroll through the dense legal text that made my eyes hurt, thumb carefully marking sections like they were Bible verses I needed to memorize. Title 29, CFR 1910. Spill response procedures, fall protection requirements, powered industrial truck regulations. The language was dry, technical, boring enough to put anyone to sleep, until I started picturing actual faces instead of abstract concepts. Aiden, who had 3 kids under 10 years old at home. Abel, who was saving every penny for his daughter's quinceañera next spring. Luis, who drove in from 2 towns over because the pay here was better than anywhere closer. What if the next joke Barrett made wasn't about sludge on a concrete floor? What if it was about blood? What if someone actually got hurt because Barrett cut corners and ignored rules, and I'd seen it coming and done absolutely nothing to stop it? That thought kept me awake at night sometimes. The regulations weren't just boring legal words anymore after that realization. They were armor I could wear. They were weapons I could use. I screenshotted entire paragraphs and saved them in a folder on my phone labeled Work Stuff. I memorized section numbers until I could recite them in my sleep. I learned the language of liability, of violation, of criminal negligence. Knowledge is power, everyone says that. But specific knowledge, the kind that comes with official codes and financial penalties attached, that's a completely different kind of power entirely. I took my first photo on a Tuesday morning right before my shift ended. Forklift number 7. The one with the chipped yellow paint and the persistent smell of burning oil that made your eyes water. The seatbelt was cracked straight down the middle, held together with silver duct tape wrapped around it multiple times. Someone had looped the whole thing behind the seat so the safety alarm wouldn't beep when you sat down. Clever solution. Incredibly dangerous. I crouched beside the machine and zoomed in carefully on the inspection sticker riveted to the frame. 6 months overdue. The date was faded, but still readable, if you looked close. I saved the photo to a hidden album on my phone, one buried 3 folders deep in my photo library, labeled simply Receipts. It felt dramatic when I first typed that name, but receipts was exactly what they were. Proof of negligence. Evidence of violations. I took more photos over the following weeks, dozens of them. Pallets stacked in front of the fire exit, blocking it completely. Extension cords daisy-chained together in a line like some kind of electrical suicide pact waiting to spark. The emergency eye wash station with an actual padlock on it because someone kept stealing the saline bottles to flush their contact lenses. Each photo was a timestamp, a GPS coordinate, a piece of hard evidence. How many receipts would it take to buy my freedom from this place? I didn't know yet, but I was collecting them like currency, like savings, like ammunition. We heard the sound before we actually saw what was happening, a metallic gasp, the groan of steel bending under too much weight. I looked up for my pallet jack just as the loaded pallet on rack D4 started to tilt forward. Boxes shifted, sliding toward the edge. Everything moved in slow motion. "Stop!" I screamed, my voice cracking. The forklift driver slammed both feet on the brake pedal. The whole machine lurched forward, then jerked to a stop. Boxes skidded right to the edge of the pallet but somehow didn't fall. For 3 long seconds that felt like an hour. Nobody in the entire warehouse breathed. Nobody moved. Then the pallet slowly settled back. The driver climbed down from his seat, his face gray like old concrete. He walked over to me on shaking legs, hands trembling. "Brake's been mushy for weeks," he whispered, looking around to make sure no supervisors were listening. "Told them twice already." "Told who?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He just looked at me. We both knew. He'd told Barrett. Barrett had nodded, said he'd handle it, promised to put in a work order, and then did absolutely nothing. The driver went back to work without another word. I pulled out my small black notebook and wrote it all down in careful detail. Date. Exact time. Rack D4. Near-miss incident. Brake failure reported twice and deliberately ignored. I underlined the word ignored, twice with heavy pen strokes. Would this be the one that finally mattered? Or would it take someone actually getting hurt or killed before anyone paid attention? Barrett handed me the paper the next morning right as I was about to clock out. "Coaching notice," he said with a smile that made my stomach turn. I read the header first, then the body text. Disruptive tone during work hours. Insubordination. Failure to follow direct supervisory orders. My cheeks burned hot with anger and humiliation. The words were so carefully chosen, written in that special corporate language designed specifically to protect the company and throw employees under the bus. I folded the paper once, creasing it sharp and deliberate. Then I pulled out my phone right there in front of him and took a photo of the entire document, making sure the company letterhead was visible. His smile twitched. "What are you doing?" "Keeping a copy for my records," I said. My voice stayed even and calm. I went home that morning and wrote my rebuttal on my old laptop at the kitchen table. No emotion, no anger, no accusations, just cold facts. Timeline of events, names of witnesses, the existence of the spill kit he'd ignored, the specific OSHA regulation I'd cited about refusing unsafe work. I emailed it to HR and CC'd myself. The next day, HR called me into their office. The woman behind the desks smiled, thin and professional, the kind of smile that doesn't reach anywhere near the eyes. "We'll review this thoroughly," she said in that careful tone. But her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Would they actually review it? Or would it disappear into some filing cabinet drawer, never to be seen again until a lawsuit forced them to look? The janitor wheeled his cleaning cart past my station 2 nights later. His name was Vivian, and he'd worked at Crossway longer than anyone else in the building, maybe 15 years. He was invisible, the way janitors always are in these places. People looked right through him like he was a ghost. He paused by my pallet jack and bent down like he was picking up a piece of trash from the floor. "I saw what he did to you," he murmured quietly. His eyes were soft but steady when they met mine. He slid a folded paper towel toward me across the concrete. I waited until he moved on with his cart before I unfolded it carefully. Inside was a list, written in neat, careful handwriting. Dates, times, brief descriptions. Minor spills he'd been called to clean up over the past 6 months. Spills that should have been officially logged and properly investigated. Spills that were evidence of something bigger, something systematically wrong with how this place operated. I looked up, but Vivian was already halfway across the warehouse, pushing his cart toward the office section. Why was he helping me? Maybe he was tired too. Tired of seeing dangerous things and saying nothing. Tired of being invisible. Tired of watching people get hurt. I folded the paper towel carefully and tucked it into my notebook. I had an ally now. Unexpected but real. Maybe that would be enough to make a difference. There's an old dome camera mounted above the time clock where we all punch in and out. Most people forget it's even there because the little red recording light died years ago. Everyone just assumes it's broken, a piece of abandoned security theater. I didn't assume that. I'd watched the IT guy replace the hard drive once during a night shift, muttering under his breath about storage space issues. The camera worked fine. It just didn't advertise itself. I filed a formal written request with HR for footage from 2 specific nights. The night Barrett ordered me to clean a chemical spill with my shirt, and the night of the near-catastrophic pallet fall on rack D4. I cited the official safety policy Barrett himself had made us all sign during new employee onboarding sessions. The policy that specifically said workplace incidents would be reviewed using all available resources and documentation. I submitted the form on a Monday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, I still hadn't heard back from anyone. I checked the camera when I clocked in for my shift. The little access panel below it was closed and locked. If the footage existed, and I was certain it did, would someone make it quietly disappear? Or would they be too slow, too careless, too confident, and leave it there for me to find? At 2:27 in the morning, I sat alone in the public library parking lot with my laptop balanced on my steering wheel. The building was closed and dark, but the Wi-Fi signal reached outside to the parking spaces. I'd drafted this email 3 separate times, deleting it twice because I lost my nerve. My hands hovered over the keyboard, shaking slightly. Then I closed my eyes, took a breath, and hit send before I could change my mind again. The anonymous tip went directly to the State Labor Department hotline, carefully routed through a VPN service so it couldn't be traced back to my IP address or location. I attached photos. The forklift with the cracked seatbelt held together with tape, the dangerously overloaded racks, Vivian's handwritten list of unreported chemical spills, The complaint about faulty brakes that had been ignored. I kept my message short, factual, completely free of emotion. No accusations, no dramatics. Just, please investigate the following safety violations at Crossway Distribution Center. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark car. My heart felt like it was trying to physically escape my chest, hammering against my ribs. I just swallowed a lit match. The only question now was whether I'd burn up from the inside and turn to ash, or whether I'd light the whole room on fire and expose everything. I drove to work and clocked in at exactly 3 a.m. Nobody looked at me differently. Nobody acted strange. Nobody knew what I'd just done. Yet, the schedule changed again on Friday without warning or explanation. My start time suddenly moved from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. My breaks, which used to be a solid 30 minutes, were now chopped up into 2 separate 15-minute periods. Business needs, Barrett said when I asked him about it directly. He didn't even look at me when he answered, just kept typing on his computer. He was retaliating against me. I knew it absolutely. He knew it. But proving retaliation in a way that would hold up was completely different from knowing it in your gut. I clocked in at exactly 2 a.m. and started logging every single thing that happened, every pallet I personally moved, every truck I helped unload, every box I scanned, every minute I worked past my scheduled break time. I wrote it all down in my notebook with precise timestamps. If Barrett wanted to create a paper trail against me, I'd give him one right back. I'd lace it with so much documented truth that it would be thick as rope. How long until that rope looped around his ankles and pulled him down? I didn't know. But I wasn't backing down now. Not after everything I'd already done. Not after I'd come this far. I watched him through the office window, laughing with another supervisor, both of them looking relaxed and casual. He thought he'd won. He genuinely believed he'd scared me into either quitting or keeping my mouth shut permanently. He had absolutely no idea what was actually coming for him. He couldn't see the wave building on the horizon, getting bigger, getting closer, about to break right over his head. Word of my one sentence spread through the warehouse the way gossip always does in places like this. Through cigarette breaks and lunch tables and whispered conversations in the aisles between shelving units. People started looking at me differently after that confrontation. Some people looked at me like I was completely reckless and stupid. Some looked at me like I was genuinely brave. Most looked at me like I'd just made their own day more dangerous by poking the bear. If Barrett came down hard on me, would he start coming down on them too? Would he make everyone's life miserable because of what I'd done? I saw those questions in their faces. The fear, the resentment, the worry. Was I being selfish by standing up? Or was I finally being useful by saying what everyone else was too scared to say? I didn't have a good answer. Aiden started avoiding me completely now. Abel still nodded hello when we passed each other, but he didn't stop to chat anymore. Luis started taking all his breaks alone in his truck. I felt the isolation like cold water, rising slowly, getting deeper. But I also felt something else happening. A few people, Vivian, a truck driver named Felix, a woman from receiving named Bryn, they started watching Barrett more carefully now. They started noticing things they'd ignored before. And noticing is always the first step toward actual change. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I felt. A friend of a friend texted me a phone number and a name late one night. Theo Butler, employment attorney. I sat on my front porch after my shift ended, the night air cool and clean on my hands, and dialed the number. He answered on the third ring. His voice was calm, professional, measured. I told him everything, the whole story from the beginning. When I finally finished talking, there was a long pause on the line. Then he said exactly 3 things. Document everything. Don't confront him directly. Don't quit your job. Not yet. I wrote those 3 lines at the very top of a new page in my notebook. They felt like commandments, like rules of engagement, like strategy. Document. Keep doing exactly what I was already doing. Don't confront. Don't give Barrett any excuse to fire me for cause. Don't quit. If I quit voluntarily, I'd lose unemployment benefits, lose leverage, lose everything. They want you to quit, Theo said quietly. Don't give them what they want. I thanked him and hung up. But sitting there in the dark, staring at those 3 lines, I wondered, could I actually follow those rules? The inspectors returned 1 week later. This time they brought a supervisor and a box of bright orange tamper seals. They weren't asking anymore. They were acting. They marked 3 forklifts out of service with tags that couldn't be removed without breaking. They tagged sections of racking with yellow caution tape. They asked for the maintenance log in its original form. Barrett tried to laugh it off. He handed over a binder. One inspector flipped through it slowly, page by page. Then he stopped. He looked up. "These entries," he said. "Same handwriting, same pen, same pressure, all filled out at once." Barrett's face went pale. "Our vendor handles that," he said too quickly. The inspector tilted his head. "Your vendor's initials are the same as yours," he said. His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "Dr. Barrett Ross. If a man deflates, does it make a sound? I found out that day. It's a quiet thing. A hiss, a sigh." The inspector closed the binder and handed it to his partner. Barrett cornered me by the time clock after the inspectors left. His voice was low and hot, pressed close to my ear. "You think this is over?" Spit flecked his words. "You'll never work in this town again. I'll make sure of it." I looked at the clock. The red numbers glowed on my wrist, painting my skin. Time felt like a weapon in that moment. Something you could hold, something you could wield. "Maybe not here," I said quietly, "but I won't be the one who can't show my face." I clocked out. The machine beeped. Barrett stood there, frozen. I walked past him toward the exit. My legs felt shaky, but I didn't let it show. Behind me, I heard him breathing hard. Did he hear the door closing? Not the physical door. The other one. The one on his career, his reputation, his easy cruelty. I pushed through the exit into the night. The air was cold and clean. I filled my lungs and kept walking. The email came at 9:02 on a Monday morning. I was asleep, phone buzzing on my nightstand. I grabbed it, squinting at the screen. The subject line read, "Personnel Update." Barrett Ross had been suspended pending investigation. By 9:05, my phone was blowing up. Texts from coworkers, screenshots of the company-wide email. The warehouse buzzed like a hive that had finally heard its own wings. People were talking, asking questions, saying things they'd been too scared to say before. 1 week later, another email. Barrett had been terminated for falsifying safety records, retaliation against employees, and willful safety violations. HR was being restructured. The warehouse manager was being reassigned. I came in for my next shift, and the room felt different. People stood straighter, talked louder. Someone had removed Barrett's nameplate from the office door. The space where it used to be was cleaner than the rest, a bright rectangle of paint. Was it lighter because of the new lights they'd installed, or because we could finally breathe? A competing facility called me 3 weeks later. The manager said an inspector had recommended me. Someone who actually gives a damn, he'd said. They offered me a supervisor position. Better pay. Day shift. Actual benefits. I walked into my new office on a Wednesday morning. It wasn't fancy, just a desk, a computer, a window. But the window caught the sunrise, painting everything copper and gold. I could see trucks pulling in, drivers unloading in the cool morning air. It felt right. One afternoon, about a month in, I saw him through the glass. Barrett. He was wearing a delivery uniform, scanning a package at our receiving dock. His eyes stayed down. He didn't look up. I watched him for a moment, and I waited for the triumph to hit. The satisfaction, the revenge. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt relief. Like stepping out of a too tight shoe. Like finally putting down something heavy. He'd ordered me to mop a floor with my shirt. I'd answered with one sentence and a plan. And that's how the mess finally got cleaned. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I'd do it differently. The answer is no. Not because it was easy, it wasn't. Not because I didn't lose things, I did. Friends who stopped talking to me. Nights I couldn't sleep. Weeks when I thought I'd made a huge mistake. But I'd do it again, because silence costs more than speaking up. Because someone had to say no. Because the next person might not have been as lucky as I was. They might have gotten hurt, they might have died, and I would have known I could have stopped it. The notebook sits in my desk drawer now. I don't need it anymore, but I keep it as a reminder. Document. Don't confront, don't quit, and know when the moment comes to stop being quiet and start being loud. Barrett thought he could humiliate me into submission. He thought I was weak, easy, disposable. He was wrong. And now he knows it. The warehouse still runs, the trucks still come, but the air is different now, Cleaner, safer. That's enough for me.